In a cave near Krak, Poland, sits a single Neanderthal molar, roughly 46,000 years old, carrying a groove worn smooth into its side, the mark of something thin and firm, dragged in and out between two teeth thousands of times by someone dead for nearly 50 millennia. Researchers who examined the tooth under 2D and 3D imaging. In a 2021 study on the Stajnia cave remains led by Violeta Nowachevska, concluded it belonged to a Neanderthal man in his 30s, cleaning between his teeth much the same way people still do after dinner today. For most of human history, dental care wasn't brushing, it was picking. And how certain researchers were about that turned out to be stranger than the picking itself. The habit is far older than that single molar. Interproximal grooves, the technical name for these marks, were first identified in 1911 and have since been found on hominin teeth dated as far back as 84 million years, catalogued in a landmark 2001 review by paleoanthropologist Peter Ungar and colleagues. That predates Homo sapiens as a species by well over 1 million years. The same kind of grooves have turned up on Homo habilis, Homo erectus, Homo heidelbergensis, and Neanderthal teeth, recovered from Africa, Europe, and Eastern Asia alike. For decades, this pattern was treated as one of the oldest indirect signs of deliberate tool use anywhere in the genus Homo. Older than controlled fire, older than deliberate burial. Some researchers went further and called it, flatly, the oldest human habit. So for most of the 20th century, that's where the story stopped. Early hominins jabbing something, bone splinters, grass stems, twigs, between their teeth to knock loose trapped food. Simple, reflexive, not so different from a bored modern diner working a toothpick at a restaurant table. Then a molar from Krapina in modern-day Croatia complicated things. The Krapina Neanderthal remains had been sitting in museum collections since their excavation between 1899 and 1905. In 2017, David Freyer, professor emeritus of anthropology at the University of Kansas, published a reanalysis of one individual's teeth, dated to roughly 130,000 years old. It wasn't just toothpick grooves. Freyer's team found a rotated premolar, a partially impacted third molar, and scratches on a nearby tooth, a whole cluster of dental damage that, taken together, looked less like idle grooming and more like someone trying to manage a genuinely painful mouth. This wasn't hygiene. This was self-treatment, a Neanderthal doing at-home dentistry roughly 130,000 years before anyone would coin the phrase "just going to look this up first." A separate case pushed the idea even further. At Cova Foradà, a cave near Valencia, Spain, researcher Marina Lozano and colleagues analyzed a Neanderthal jaw in a 2013 study, showing toothpick grooves positioned directly alongside clear signs of periodontal disease, inflamed, receding gum tissue that would have made ordinary chewing painful. The wear pattern lined up specifically with the diseased area, not spread generally across the row of teeth. Lozano called it the oldest documented case of palliative dental treatment on record. Pain management, applied by a Neanderthal to their own mouth. It's worth sitting with that phrase for a second, palliative dental treatment. Not a euphemism invented for a museum placard, a genuine diagnostic term applied to a hominin that went extinct 40,000 years ago. One case pushed further still. A lower molar known as Shagorskaya 64, recovered from Chagorskaya cave in Russia's Altai Mountains and dated to roughly 59,000 years old, shows a deep, deliberately shaped cavity cut down toward the pulp chamber. A team led by Elisa Zubova and Lydia Zotkina, working with archaeologist Ksenia Kolobova of the Siberian branch of the Russian Academy of Sciences, concluded the concavity was made with a rotating, drilling motion using a small stone perforator, essentially, in the words of co-author John Olson of the University of Arizona, a root canal. To test the idea, Zotkina replicated the procedure on modern teeth using jasper tools recovered from the same site, producing linear marks that matched the ancient molar almost exactly. As with any conclusion drawn from a single tooth, it isn't beyond dispute. But if the team is right, it's the oldest known instance of a hominin performing an invasive medical procedure on itself, tens of thousands of years before anyone would have called it dentistry. But in 2025, a study did something nobody had really done across more than a century of arguing over these grooves. It checked animals that have never picked up a tool in their lives. A team led by Ian Towell at Monash University examined 531 wild primates across 27 species, living and extinct, chimpanzees, orangutans, lemurs, monkeys, apes with no access to bone splinters, grass stems, or stone tools of any kind. Published in the American Journal of Biological Anthropology, the study found the exact same interproximal grooves, the ones textbooks had spent a century calling humanity's oldest habit, occurring naturally in animals that had certainly never picked their teeth on purpose. The grooves, it turns out, can form from ordinary chewing stress alone. No toolkit required. That doesn't erase everything that came before it, it just moves the goalposts. The broad, generic grooves scattered across the deep hominin record, the ones used for a century to argue tool use stretched back 184 million years, now look far less certain. But Krapina and Cova Foradà were never generic. Their grooves sat precisely on top of documented disease, aimed at exactly the tooth that hurt, in patterns wild primates in the new study never showed. A groove that lines up with an abscess is a different kind of evidence than a groove alone. So the real answer to whether ancient humans brushed their teeth turns out to be built on a shakier foundation than the field assumed for 100 years. And yet the strangest, most specific cases, a Neanderthal easing an aching gum, another possibly drilled straight into an aching pulp, still stand on their own, independent of every generic groove now back in question. A drawer in any modern kitchen or a dispenser by a restaurant register still holds the same basic tool in a different material. Wood, plastic, sometimes mint-flavored plastic, used, presumably, for the same reason someone in Croatia once reached for whatever was nearby. The shape survived. Whether the fossil record has been reading that reason correctly for 100 years is, as of a study published in 2025, no longer settled at all. Over a century since these grooves were first identified as evidence of the oldest human habit, 130,000 years since a Neanderthal in Croatia scratched at an impacted molar hard enough to leave a permanent record of it, 531 wild primates across 27 species checked for the very first time, 59,000 years since a hole was drilled straight down into the one part of a tooth that actually hurts,